Some of Arizona's 1.1 million students will return to class as soon as Friday. A historic teacher strike kept them out of the classrooms this week. Governor Doug Ducey signed a bill Thursday that will raise wages for the state's teachers by 20% over the next 3 years. But organizers of the walkout say their work is not over yet as they look ahead to midterm elections.
We're going to continue our quest for the schools that our students deserve. We're going to go to the ballot with an initiative and put in front of the voters for $700 million to invest in our schools.
Jim Nintzel is the executive editor of Tucson Weekly. He joins us now via webcam from Tucson. Jim, thanks very much for giving us some of your time today. How concerned are lawmakers about this kind of newfound energy among teachers as we head towards the election cycle? And which party is this likely to benefit?
Well, I think they're concerned. The Republican lawmakers are very concerned because when the session started out, they did not have any plans to spend this kind of money on education, and they reversed course once they saw the energy that the teachers had. Exactly how this is going to play out remains to be seen because the teachers are very skeptical that the money will actually be there for these raises that have been promised. And they are certainly not trusting the legislature to do this. As you mentioned, there is a ballot initiative to try to ensure that there'll be funding for teachers, that they're going to try to gather enough signatures for to put on the ballot. And they have to gather more than 150,000 ballot signatures before if that actually happens. How this is going to play out remains to be seen at the ballot box. I think Republicans are going to be able to go out and say, hey, no, we added all this money to education. Democrats are going to say they didn't add enough. And the voters are going to have to decide between those two narratives.
And these teachers are going to want to keep a close eye on the follow-through. Are they going to get what they've been promised? These Republican primaries, for example, are just a few months away. It's a tight race for Senator Jeff Flake's seat. Do you see any of the candidates having a specific edge at this point on this issue?
Well, this is more of a state issue than a federal issue, so I think ultimately I don't know how much this will play into that. But I do think that if you look at who's running in the Republican primary in Arizona for Senator Flake's seat, Martha McSally is probably the leader in that particular race. She is a congresswoman here in southern Arizona. She's very good at fundraising. She's a former A-10 pilot and squadron commander here in southern Arizona, kind of vanished from the scene and then returned when Gabby Giffords retired after she was recovering from the injuries in that assassination attempt, ran for that office, managed to become the nominee in 2014, lost, or 2012, excuse me, came back in 2014, won the seat very narrowly by 167 votes, but then in her re-election campaign in 2016 won handily. She has been someone who's played very moderately in the public because she represents a swing district, but she's swung really far to the right as she's entered this Senate race because I think she's concerned of weaknesses among conservative voters. She's running against a very conservative former state lawmaker in the form of Kelly Ward and, of course, Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was ousted by voters in Maricopa County and then had a conviction in federal court of contempt of court, which was overturned by President Trump, who pardoned him.
Now, we were just seeing footage there of Martha McSally climbing out of an old-school plane. President Trump and Joe Arpaio, as you mentioned, have a close relationship, so Arpaio tying himself to Trump. Kelly Ward has been endorsed by the president's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon. But when you look at this Morning Consult poll last month, it shows only 49% of Arizona voters approve of the president's actions so far. So how is the proximity to President Trump impacting the race? And do you see someone like Martha McSally trying to be the moderate and distancing herself paying off? I mean, what's the equation there?
Well, she's really embraced Trump since she entered the Senate race, and I think that's because even though voters are kind of split on Trump here in Arizona in the general population, they still support him within the Republican Party itself. And so everybody wants to be close to him in order to win the primary. How that plays out in the general kind of remains to be seen as well, because she's up against a very moderate Democrat. The most likely Democrat to emerge from the Democratic primary is another Congresswoman, Kyrsten Sinema, who has one of the most moderate voting records in Congress and has also raised about $6 million for this race. So she's going to be a very formidable Democrat. And there's always this talk, is Arizona finally going to go purple? Are they going to elect a Democrat? It's been many years since you've seen a Democrat win at a statewide level, but this is the year they say Arizona's going to go purple. We hear that every year, though, so we'll see what happens.
And before we let you go, I want to ask you about Senator John McCain. He's battling serious health issues. If he were to leave his seat, how would that impact Arizona's political future?
Well, that is one of the storylines going on here in Arizona right now. If Senator McCain were to die before the end of May, then his seat would also be up for election this year, which could lead to some changing. Maybe Joe Arpaio or Kelly Ward would switch over to that race. So there's a lot of complications yet to be determined. And it's something that people aren't really talking about publicly. Governor Ducey, who would appoint someone to that seat if Senator McCain were to pass away, has said that if anyone approaches him about it, they immediately disqualify themselves. So, but at the same time, you also had the state legislature trying to change the law so that if indeed Senator McCain were to pass away, then the appointee would keep that seat until 2020. That bill failed. So we'll have to wait and see what happens this month.
Interesting times in Arizona. Jim Nintzel, thanks for speaking with us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.